not faking it. Gently uncomfortable, genuinely convinced something was wrong. We did the pediatrician thing, visit, everything checked out fine, and it wasn't until the third week that she finally said, kind of quietly, I think I'm scared of the reading group thing. Not the whole school day, one specific 10-minute activity, 3 times a week. And I remember feeling almost relieved and also completely unprepared at the same time. Relieved because it wasn't a mystery illness, unprepared because I had absolutely no idea what to do with it. I'm scared of reading group thing once she said it loud. Well, here we are, guys. Welcome back to Parents Support Circle. I'm Curtis.
And I'm RJ. And this one's actually close to home too, because Armando went through a stretch of that, that lasted longer than 2 weeks, and I got a lot of it wrong before I got any of it right.
Right, what did you get wrong, RJ? Just to set up today.
Well, I think I treated it like a problem that I could solve,
Right.
right, for her instead of, a skill she needed to build for herself, right? We'll get into why that distinction matters to so much, I think, today.
Right on. So, and how do you actually tell the difference between a normal kid worry and something that needs more than a podcast episode like this can offer?
Absolutely. And, that's, sorry, and that's an important line to draw, I think, right? So we're
Yep.
not skipping this. We're going to discuss this today.
Right on, RJ. Thanks. This one is for anyone who has ever watched their kids struggle with something and felt that self-specific helplessness of not knowing whether to step in, wait it out, or call someone to help.
Right, which is most parents, right? Anxiety is in kids is common enough that if you haven't run into some version of it yet, you will likely do so. That doesn't mean something's wrong with your kid or even with you.
That's a good point there, RJ. So let's start here. Every kid worries sometimes. How do you know when it's crossed into something that needs real attention?
There are a few markers. Duration is one of them, right?
Yep.
Is it a bad week or has it been going on for a month or more, right?
Yep.
And then there's intensity. Is it manageable discomfort or is it disrupting sleep, eating, school attendance? And, then there's scope. Has it stayed contained to one specific thing, like London's reading group, or
Right.
has it started spreading to unrelated situations?
Yeah, right. So London's case stayed pretty contained, at least so far for that school year, right?
Mhm. And that's reasonably good sign that things are not that bad, right? Um,
Hmm.
Relatively speaking, if it's contained, specific anxiety is very common, very workable with tools we'll talk about today. If it's pervasive, touching sleep, appetite, multiple unrelated areas of life,
Yeah.
lasting many weeks, that's the signal to loop in a pediatrician or child therapist, not
Yep.
just as a last resort, but as a completely normal step.
Yep. Yeah, for sure. I want to underline that because I think some parents here get professional help as an admission of failure,
Mm.
which is not.
Yeah, and it's the opposite of failure, right? It's the same as taking a kid to a doctor for a
Yep.
fever that won't break, right? You're not failing by getting support. You're parenting well by recognizing when something's outside your toolkit.
Yeah. Excellent. Is there a way to check in on those markers without turning it into a formal evaluation every week?
Sure, you don't need a checklist taped to the fridge, right?
Yeah.
Just periodically ask yourself these three questions in the
Yep.
background. One, how long has this been going on? How much is it actually disrupting your daily life?
Yep.
And three, is it staying in one lane or spreading?
Right.
If your honest answers start trending toward longer, more disruptive, and spreading, that's the key to bring in support, even if no single moment feels like a crisis.
Right on, RJ. So it's less about one bad day and more about the trending line, right?
Yeah, exactly. Same as most things we talk about on this show, right? Trend over a snapshot.
Right on. Okay, so let's say it's the more common contained kind of worry. What's the instinctive most of us have that doesn't actually work?
Reassurance on repeat, right? It'll be fine. Don't worry. You'll do great, right? These things said once, that's a normal, loving thing to say. but 15 times over a couple of weeks, it starts to do the opposite of what you want.
Right on. Okay, so why does it backfire specifically?
Because repeated assurance accidentally teaches a kid that their worry needs an expert opinion for you to believe, or yeah, to believe it's safe to move forward. They start seeking the reassurance itself as a coping mechanism instead of
Right.
building their own tolerance for uncertainty. And worse is if you're reassuring them constantly, it can actually confirm in their mind that the thing really is scary enough to need constant reassurance. Otherwise,
Right.
why would you keep saying it?
Yeah, that's a strange paradox, there, RJ. The comfort itself believes evidence that comfort is needed, right?
Um, yeah. Um, so exactly, it's counterintuitive, right? But it's one of the most well documented patterns in how anxiety gets accidentally reinforced by loving, well meaning parents.
Right. So what do you do instead if you're not reassured?
Validate the feeling without answering for the outcome, right? That reading group sounds like it feels really hard right now, is different from
Yep.
you'll be totally fine, I promise, right? One acknowledges her experience, the other tries to
Yep.
argue her out of it, which almost never works with anxiety, right? Because anxiety isn't actually logic in the first place.
Right. Sure. Let's get a little practical, RJ. What tools have actually worked for you and your kids over the years?
And again, this took a long time to learn, and even some counseling
Hmm.
as well, right? So that's why I say,
Yep.
knowing how to call in a professional. First, name it together calmly outside the
Yep.
anxious moment itself, right? Not in the parking
Hmm.
lot right before reading group, but at breakfast or before bed. I noticed reading groups feeling scary lately. What does that feel like in your body, right? Naming it when the nervous system isn't actually activated makes it something that's actually examining together.
Right. I did something like that with London, actually, and she said her stomach gets tight and jumpy, which was more specific than I expected from, well, at that time, 8 years old.
And kids are actually often surprisingly precise once you ask the right way, right? Here's another tool is break the scary thing into the smaller first step, not the whole thing at once, right?
Right.
We've talked about this, breaking things into smaller groups. Maybe just,
Yep.
if the reading group is the mountain, what's the smallest possible piece of it, right? Just walking into the room without having to read yet, right? Small, achievable steps. Let a kid feel collective evidence that they can handle it, right? Piece by piece instead
Right.
of being asked to leap over the whole fear one go.
Right on. And what would you say the third would be?
Um, I think you can model calm processing yourself out loud with your own smaller anxieties, right? I'm a little
Hmm.
nervous about this work meeting, right? So I'm going to take a few breaths and
Right.
just show up anyway. Kids learn an enormous amount about handling anxiety from watching you handle yours. Even totally
Right.
unrelated group anxieties, more than anything, you explicitly teach them about their own.
Nice. That's a good point there, RJ. Is there a fourth one, or do these cover all of it, would you
No, I
say?
can add one more, which is
Sure.
celebrating the attempt, right? Not just the outcome. If London walks into a reading group and it feels hard, that's worth
Yep.
noticing out loud, regardless how the reading itself goes, right? You did the
Hmm.
scary part. You walked in. It matters more than developmentally than you read really well today. Otherwise, a kid that learns that only success counts and anxiety already tells them that failure is catastrophic, right? You don't want to
Right.
accidentally confirm that belief by only praising the successful outcomes.
I like that one, RJ. Yeah, just by showing up sometimes can make a difference, right?
Mhm.
So that basically reframes progress, even what looks like the walking in is the win, not the performance once inside, right?
Absolutely. That's the exact shift right there, right? Anxiety work is measured in approach, not in polish.
Excellent. So RJ, what would you actually do differently with Amanda looking back now that you have more experience and stuff?
I I did this with my kids. I stopped trying to fix it for them, right?
Yep.
For a longest stretch. Every time she was anxious about something, I went into problem solving mode immediately, right? Emailing teachers, researching schedules, trying to engineer the scary thing out of existence. It felt like helping,
Hmm.
but it was actually robbing her of the chance to discover she can handle hard feelings and come out the other side okay.
Excellent. So how would you figure that out now,
Well, how
or
did
let
I
other
figure it
people
out?
know about that? Yeah.
It was her therapist. I talked about this, right? Actually, pretty directly. You told me my job wasn't to remove every obstacle. It was a steady presence while she worked through them, right? That reframed
Yep.
everything. I started asking, what do you think might help? Instead of jumping straight into
Oh,
solutions I'd already decided on, slower, harder to watch in the moment, but it built something in her that my fixing never could have.
right on. Little guest appearance with London here today
Mhm.
in the background. That's a hard shift for a parent. Watch your kids struggle instead of stepping in,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah. It's one of the hardest things I've done as a parent, right? But Armanda years later told me she remembers feeling like I trusted her to handle things, right? Even when she
Right.
was scared. And that trust matters more to her than any problem I ever solved for her.
Oh, right on. Good. Did the fixed instinct ever come back even after the therapist's advice landed for you guys?
All the time, right? Honestly, especially early on, right?
Yep.
You have to build the habit. Look, we're parents. We want to fix. We want to do the
Yep.
best for our kids, right? But old habits don't just switch off because someone gave you good advice once, right? What changed was I
Right.
got faster at catching myself mid fix and backing off.
Hmm.
Sometimes literally, right?
Good.
Sometimes stopping myself mid sentence when I heard myself starting to problem solve instead of just listening. It's still a muscle I have to
Right
use
on.
on purpose, even now, watching them, and they're grown up, right? Watching them navigate plenty of grown up anxieties as an adult. We still want to jump in and fix it for them.
Yeah, I can just imagine, RJ. That's pretty reassuring that you're actually able to do that. That it doesn't just become automatic, right? It's a no, it's a conscious thing that you're doing, right?
Nothing about parenting is fully automatic, right? You just get a little quicker at noticing and correcting and being willing to make a change.
Awesome, RJ. All right, so some quick ones. My kid said her stomach hurts every single morning. Is that anxiety or something physical, would you say?
That's worth a doctor visit, right? To rule out anything physical. But recurring
Right.
situation specific stomach aches with no medical cause are very common anxiety presentation in kids, especially when it comes to school.
Yeah. Should I let my kid avoid the scary thing altogether if it's really upsetting
Mm.
them? What'd you say?
Occasional accommodation is fine and human, but avoidance as the default strategy tends to grow the anxiety over time rather than to shrink it. Small,
Right.
supported exposure beats total avoidance over almost every time.
Cool. So my kid gets anxious and then angry, not tearful. Is that anxiety still too?
Yep, very often. Yep. Anger is frequently anxiety wearing a different costume, right? Especially in kids who haven't developed the vocabulary for I'm scared, right? Same underlying tools tend to apply.
Okay. So how do I talk about this with a kid who insists nothing's wrong, even when it clearly is?
Don't push for the confession, right? Just tell them what you're noticing gently without demanding agreement. I've
Yep.
noticed mornings have felt harder lately. I'm here whenever you want to talk about it, right? Sometimes it takes weeks before they take you up on that offer, and that's okay.
Yeah. Right on. Is it normal for anxiety to show up around a completely new thing that was never a problem before?
Completely normal. Anxiety doesn't require a drastic backstory, right? New
Right.
environments, new social dynamics, even a substitute teacher can trigger it out of nowhere.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
New doesn't mean something's fundamentally wrong. It usually just means something is genuinely new in their environment and needs the same small steps approach as anything else.
Well, excellent, excellent, RJ. I'm glad you enjoyed those rapid fire questions.
Mhm.
Let's wrap it up for today. So, with London, we ended up talking to her teacher who let her sit near a friend during reading group instead of by herself. And we practiced the walking in part a few mornings before school. Just that one small step, stomach aches cleared up, And within about a week and a half, everything was all good again.
A small step, real relief, and that's usually how it goes.
Right on. Cool. All right, guys. So if you enjoyed today's episode, share it with a friend. Leave a comment on Facebook if you're watching on YouTube. Like, subscribe, and ring the bell so next time we go live, you'll be notified. And today we have a free workbook for you, just the parent support circle workbook for you. On the bottom there is scrolling. Um, so let's move on. For now, if your kid's been carrying something like this, try naming it outside of the anxious moment itself and see if it actually says when you ask what they say when you ask them.
Mhm. And it's if it's bigger than a podcast episode can hold. We've given
Yep.
you some real advice today, but don't forget, reaching out for counseling is an acceptable response. You may not have all the answers, right? Um, please reach out for real support to a professional. That's not failure. That's just good parenting.
Absolutely. Thanks for that closing remark, RJ. And thanks for being here, guys, and helping to support the Parent Support Circle.